Alright, Trekkies and Trekkers, now it's time for the third episode of Read of the Day, Past Tense, Part 1. As the USS Defiant enters orbit around Earth, Commander Sisko remarks that he will never be tired of seeing the view of his home planet from orbit. However, Lieutenant Dax thinks the seas could use some more purple, while Major Kira thinks they are not green enough. Smiling, Dr. Bashir observes that there is no place like home, no matter what color the seas are. Dax reminds Sisko that they're scheduled to have dinner with Admiral Drasman, and Sisko rolls his eyes. Chief O'Brien recognizes the commanding officer of the Proxima maintenance yards and does not relish the thought of eating with Drone or Drasman. However, Bashir reminds O'Brien that the entire senior staff was invited to dinner, but O'Brien says such formalities are the reason he chose to be an enlisted man. Dax selfishly shares Bashir's sentiment as she invites Kira and Constable Odo to come along. But Kira politely declines, and Odo calls the dinner strictly a Starfleet occasion with a hint of amusement. An emergency subspace signal arrives from Deep Space Nine, but when Sisko opens the channel, Quark appears on the view screen. Quark ignores Kira. She impatiently reminds him that the channel he is on is for emergency use. He informs Sisko that the Grand Nagus Zek has instructed him to remind Sisko of the critical role the Nagus played in establishing contact with the Dominion. Odo rolls his eyes, although Sisko politely informs Quark that he will mention Nagus prominently in his report to Starfleet security. Quark reluctantly adds that there is another reason he contacted the commander, which doesn't surprise Sisko. The Nagus' nephew, Belongo, has been detained by Starfleet authorities on Aldebaran 3, a slight misunderstanding, of course. Sisko admits that he owes the Nagus a favor, and Quark begins to quote the Rule of Acquisition number 111. But Sisko beats him to the punch. Treat people in their jet like family. Exploit them. Quark seems unsure of himself as Sisko explains that he has been reading up on the rules. While Sisko assures Quark that he will do whatever he can for the Nagus' nephew, he reminds Quark of Rule number 217. You can't free a fish from water. Quark quotes with a sly grin, visibly amused as he promises to relay the message to the Zek. In the transporter bay, Sisko, Dax, and Bashir step by the transporter pad as Kira and O'Brien wish them well. Sisko informs Kira that she is in command of the ship and tells O'Brien to energize the transporter. The three officers disappear in the usual flash of blue light, but an alert comes from the computer and O'Brien notices something strange. Kira asks what is wrong and reassures that there's only a minor problem with the annular confinement beam. However, he is dumbstruck when, after stabilizing the beam, the chart appears on the screen indicating that Sisko and the others never materialized at their destination. Sisko and Bashir lie cautious on the pavement as they are rudely awakened by a pair of tan-uniformed men carrying shotguns. Confused, Sisko asks who the men are, a question the older man finds humorous. Bashir and Sisko rise to their feet, disoriented, as the younger man reminds his companion they've been working all night. It's just that they forget about the strangers, as exhausted he return home to see his wife Sonia and their children. The older man calls the younger one an anarchist and reminds him that there is a law against sleeping in the streets. All he notes with leaves of Bashir and Sisko's matching pajamas. Asking that for some form of identification, such as UHC card or transit pass, the older man is dismayed to hear Bashir ask what happened to Starfleet headquarters, calling them both DIMS. Sisko slowly begins to realize where they are as he observes that there is something very familiar about the guards' shotguns and uniforms. The older man suggests it may be from last time Sisko was in a sanctuary district. Sisko recognizes the term immediately and looks alarmed. He asks what year it is. The younger man impatiently tells him it is 2024, and as the guards escort Sisko and Bashir away, Dax can be seen nearby unconscious and sitting in the entrance to a subway. A man in his mid-30s exits the subway, but stops as he does so, noticing Dax in his peripheral vision. When he wakes her, she has a headache and explains that she must have hit her head on something. He asks if she was jacked, a slang term for robbed, which Dax is unfamiliar. He goes on to say, she goes along with what he says when he asks where the assailants took her credit chips and ID, claiming they took everything but her brooch, her comm badge, which she is still wearing. However, since she's still unsure of where she is, she openly tells the man she was traveling with some friends that got separated. He introduces himself as Chris Brenner. The man offers lets Jadzia use the interface terminal as his office to order replacement ID. When he hears Dax's name is Jadzia, Chris observes how beautiful her name is and asks if it is Dutch. Something like that, Dax responds with a smile. She thanks him for helping her, but he claims he doesn't get to rescue damsel in distress every day. He helps Jazia to her feet and leads her to a nearby office building. Meanwhile, O'Brien tells one of his engineers to check the Heisenberg compensators and begins a level 1 diagnostic of the pattern buffers. Characters are behind news from Starfleet, but nothing good. None of the crew members rematerialized in San Francisco, nor by any signs that they rematerialized elsewhere. According to Starfleet's sensors, the transport signal disappeared as soon as the beam-out began, but O'Brien informs her that the defined system log clearly shows they rematerialized somewhere. Well, this is good news. He doesn't know where that somewhere is. He reviews the log as they speak and concludes that the answer must not be in the log, since the unusual sign was the variance with the annular confinement beam, which he corrected. He knows the variance was caused by chronoton particles, which are emitted by the cloaking device and sometimes become lodged in the ablative armor matrix. Sally knows a surge in temporal energy just before the beam-out began. O'Brien believes that they have found their first clue, although he's not sure what it means. The guards lead Bashir and Sisko to the main entrance to Sanctuary District A, where an overcrowded apartment-style building lies behind a large cement wall. Until man Vin fills out some type of registration form, but Sparta Bernardo keeps an eye on them. Bashir and Sisko both saw the Golden Gate Bridge on the way to the Sanctuary, so they know they are at least in San Francisco. Bashir wonders what happened to their comm badges. With into frustration, Sisko informs that the communicators were probably stolen, as the Earth to which he and Bashir have become accustomed is at least a century away. They decide to try to find Dax when they get a chance, and she's probably nearby. And then what? Bashir asks with a degree of apathy. And then, Sisko responds sternly, we find our way home. Vin finishes filling out the paperwork and tells him it's time to go. As Bernardo enters Sanctuary behind them, Bernardo insists that his wife Sonia will kill him for being so late. Inside the wall, apartment buildings similar to the one they observed earlier line the streets, and there are people everywhere. Sisko explains that the place is Sanctuary District, but Bashir can see that showing the 1st century history is not one of his strong points, as it is too depressing. But Sisko admits that the citizens of Earth made some ugly mistakes. He also says they paved their way. He says they also paved the way for many things he and the Doctor take for granted in their century. The Sanctuary Districts are one of the worst mistakes. As he explains the situation to Bashir, they see that treasures everywhere and dirty people fill the streets, with only a couple sitting in a tent and a family of 3 literally living in a cardboard box. By the early 2020s, Sisko says there was a Sanctuary District like this, one in every major city throughout the United States of America. But Bashir fails to understand the purpose and asks what the people did to deserve such treatment. Sisko tells them that people with criminal records are not allowed in the sanctuaries, and those who live here are simply people without jobs or places to live. Vin instructs Bashir and Sisko to stop, tells Bernardo to go home to his wife and kids, out of both compassion for his part and visible annoyance at the ramblings of the 2 new arrivals. Bernardo thanks Vin and takes off. Gesturing forward, Vin sarcastically asks Bashir and Sisko, "Shall we?" Dax sits at a desk in a high-class apartment with a paneled wall-sized window that shows a view of San Francisco's various skyscrapers, including the Transamerica Pyramid. She uses a pen-shaped device to access a computer about the size of a small television with a monitor tilted at a 45-degree angle so as to serve as both a screen and a touchpad. There's a knock at the door and Chris Brenner enters, sitting on the desk casually, and asks if she was able to order a new ID. While it took her a while to convince the computer of her identity, she tells him that she was able to order some credit chips and a transit pass. Removing credit chip from the computer and handing it to Chris, she thanks him sincerely for letting her use his terminal in his account. He says her for a moment and observes her spots, noting they are very unusual. Dax pretends that they are tattoos. Brenner gives us that she has some done in Japan and tells of how he used to have a Maori tribal pattern running along his arm back in the 1990s, but had to remove it to look at the rest of the drones. When Dax asks what kind of business Brenner works in, he seems surprised and walks towards the window and announces sarcastically that he'll have to have a talk with public relations people. He's Chris Brenner of Brenner Information Systems, providing things like internet access and Channel 90. Oh, that Chris Brenner! Dax is someone she attempts to play dumb. While Dax probably makes Chris a sellout, Dax promises not to hold it against him. He chuckles and asks if there is a way for her to get a hold of her friends. She wishes there were. Meanwhile, Bashir and Sisko are inside a largely blandly decorated administration building within the Sanctuary District, with 2 guards standing watch outside as the entrance homeless people walk by. In a waiting room, Sisko steps into a spot marked with 2 footprints, instructed So he placed each of his hands on a scanning device, looks straight ahead as the machine takes a photograph of him. The three of them walk over to a nearby counter, where Vin accesses a computer via a peddling device similar to that which Dax used. Bashir and Cisco exchange looks as a computerized female voice welcomes Vin to the SafeTech fingerprint database. Informs him that his government discount has been accepted and advertises rental scan service on channel 178. But when the computer processes the fingerprints provided, it's able to identify either of the new arrivals. Confused, Vin observes that as if Bashir and Cisco do not exist. Well, since we don't exist, why not let us go? Bashir asks. The two of them have no IDs and no money and are dressed like clowns. Vin seems to think the matter is self-explanatory and tells Bashir to figure out for himself. So Vin turns polite as he hands Bashir and Cisco a pair of clipboards with various forms, and has them fill the paperwork to the best of their ability, and reminds that the interpreters are available if they do not speak English, and that the questions can be given verbally if they are unable to read. Now sit down, shut up. Fill the forms. If you've got any problems, don't come to me with them, he adds. Bashir thanks Vin sarcastically. Now sitting in the captain's chair, Kira cordially asks an ensign to express her gratitude to Admiral Nagomo, but said that he does not want anyone to transport aboard the Defiant until the current situation is resolved. Brightness spreads as she asks the Admiral's welcome to come aboard via shuttlecraft. O'Brien informs that the temporal surge they detected earlier was caused by an explosion and microscopic singularity passing through the solar system at the time of beam-out. As usual, his technobabble is lost in the major, but he explains that the transport signal was redirected through time, which makes the question not where Dax, Bashir, and Cisco are, but rather when. When assured that the officers arrived in San Francisco, they were deflected into another time period, most likely centuries away. A man sitting next to Cisco in the waiting room appears largely oblivious to his surroundings as he attempts to draw on Cisco's leg with a pen. When Cisco stops him, he looks at Cisco indignantly and begins to draw on the person next to him. Bashir stands on the opposite side of the room complaining to Vin. As idly by and appears unconcerned. The line has barely moved in the past 3 hours. The situation of Vin sums up as plenty of overtime. Despite Bashir's legitimate concerns, Vin simply tells him to return to his seat, rolling his eyes as Bashir does so. The next to Cisco's neighbor seems pleasantly entertained as he draws on her hand. It's obvious that neither of them is entirely coherent. Cisco seems deep in thought, staring at a digital display of the date and time on a nearby wall as Bashir rejoins him. Frustrated, Bashir observes that numerous people around them mentally ill require medical treatment, but Cisco, whose eyes are still on the clock, tells him they will not get any such treatment. Noticing with confusion Cisco's pensive look, Bashir asks what is wrong. Cisco points out the date is August 30th, 2024, and asks if Bashir has heard of the Bell riots. The doctor is only vaguely familiar with the events, so Cisco explains that it was one of the most violent civil disturbances in American history, and it occurred in San Francisco Sanctuary District A during the first week of September 2024. Unless they can find a way out of Sanctuary District soon, they are about to be caught right in the middle of the violence. Dun dun dun. Cisco describes how the Sanctuary residents will take over the district and take several guards hostage, only to have the government send troops in to restore order, killing hundreds of residents in the process. Bashir notes that, while Starfleet's temporal displacement policy sounds good in theory, a lot of people stand by and watch hundreds of people die. However, Cisco assures him that the riots will alter the course of history thanks to Gabriel Bell, the man for whom the riots were named. When the government troops stormed the compound based on rumors that the hostages were dead, they found none of the hostages had been armed thanks to Bell, who sacrificed his own life to save them. Public opinion subsequently turned against the notion of sanctuary districts, and the plan began to address its social problems. Therefore, if there weren't any of the people was going to happen, there was altering a pivotal moment in history. Ben interrupts them to inform them that it is their turn to be processed. In a cubicle in another part of the building, Bashir and Cisco wait patiently while social worker reviews their forms. Vin can be seen in the background, though it's unclear if he's been assigned to them or is simply keeping a close watch. The social worker seems surprised by the registration forms, which looks them over, and after a few moments, Cisco asks if something is wrong. She says the forms indicates they are DIMS, claiming they're instead gimmies, and apologizes for not processing the forms quicker. Cisco and Bashir are unfamiliar with slang terms. The social worker Lee explains that gimmies are ordinary people in need of a job and a place to stay. Confused, Bashir asks about the DIMS, and Lee tells him that the DIMS should be in hospitals, but since the government is unable to afford treatment for them, they are sent to the Sanctuary District. Although they express their hatred of the process, she seems to think it will not change and moves on, asking if they have applied for any jobs. Bashir tells her they do not plan to stay in San Francisco for long, and Cisco claims they are traveling with a friend. When Lee hears that they have no way to contact their friend, she implicitly informs them they have to stay in the Sanctuary District for now. Initially using the official reason that it's for their own good, she adds that it is also the law. Cisco grudgingly wonders how they are supposed to find jobs if they are stuck in the district. The district does provide a job placement service. However, due to the state of the economy, Lee is unable to give them an estimate of how long it will take to find one. The only thing she can do is tell them to be patient as she hands them each a ration card, which they can use to get food and water while in the district. Theoretically, the buildings in the district are for everyone, so she tells them they are on their own as far as accommodations go. Before they leave, Lee advises them to stay away from district security, as the guards are overworked and underpaid, and to watch out for ghosts, names for those who have integrated while in the district and tend to prey on other residents. Cisco thanks her for the advice as he and Bashir leave the cubicle. Dax is still in Brenner's apartment, still wearing herself a uniform and communicator, and taps the comm badge as she attempts to contact with Bashir or Cisco. However, she attempts to act casual and Brenner enters to announce that his assistant Britt has reserved Dax's room at the Clift for the next 5 nights. It's clear that Chris has feelings for Jadzia, but is not to seem too forward as he acknowledges that he wants to help her and asks what her plans are. She still needs to find her friends, and Brenner admits that his assistant checked with the city hospitals and trauma wards already. Unfortunately, no matching Bashir or Cisco's description was admitted recently. However, he wants to know how the search turns out. Dax smiles and uses the point to bring up a party he is having the next day and invites her and her friends. She accepts the offer and wishes her good luck as he escorts her to the door. It is night in the Sanctuary District, and some of the less fortunate residents are using metal barriers as impromptu fireplaces in order to keep warm. Bashir and Cisco attempt to enter a nearby building, but a mother rage stops them. Let me guess, this building's full, Bashir says, frustrated. The man apologizes sincerely and Bashir and Cisco walk away. Bashir finds it hard to believe that every building is full, but Cisco wouldn't be surprised if they were. At one point, nobody cared how many people were in Sanctuary, so as long as they were out of sight. Bashir finds it difficult to comprehend as they pass a schizophrenic man, pointing out that there are numerous treatments for the disease, which could help him live a normal life even in the 2020s, simply if anyone gave a damn. However, the problem is not that they don't give a damn, but that the social problems facing the planet seem too enormous to solve, something Bashir finds more depressing than aggravating. While he acknowledges that it's horrible to cause people to suffer out of hatred toward them, he can understand the notion of doing so simply because one has forgotten how to care. Cisco reassures him that if people in the 21st century will slowly but surely fix the problems they face. As they walk, Bashir begins to wonder if humans are truly indifferent from Romulans or Cardassians, if, in the event that something disastrous happened to the Federation, they would truly stick to their ideals. Cisco says matter-of-factly that it is his duty as serving officer to ensure that they never have to find out. They come to a halt when they see a group of ghosts beating a man in front of a nearby building. While Bashir immediately moves to intervene, Cisco reminds them that they can't interfere. Later tells the other ghost to get the man's ration card. Seeing Bashir's restrained look, he confidentially asks if there is a problem. Cisco speaks for Bashir and reassures the ghost that there isn't. However, the ghost takes the opportunity to have some, as he observes that Bashir seems upset and sarcastically claims they don't want to offend anyone. When Cisco informs him that he and Bashir are new to the district, the ghost takes off his head and gives them a fake welcome. As neither Cisco nor Bashir is amused, he claims the Gimmies have no sense of fun. Cisco tells them they are only looking for a place to stay. She dampens the ghost's mood as he comes closer and speaks in a serious tone. In that case, you better look somewhere else, new boy, the ghost warns Cisco. He wishes him a good day and waves goodbye as they move on to the next building. The next day, Bashir lies sleeping near the entrance to one of the buildings. Cisco wakes him, bringing a bowl with scrambled eggs and a piece of bread. Bashir promises to never complain about Deep Space Nine's Cardassian beds again. Cisco apologizes for the fact that distribution ran up both utensils and napkins, which doesn't seem to surprise Bashir. After they eat, they visit the building where they turned up previously and find the same group of men guarding it. They ask for permission just to see the roof and reassure the men that they do not plan to cause trouble. While the leader, the student turned away earlier, empathizes, the other residents feel that they have to protect what is theirs. Cisco asks if they could trade anything to access the roof. But neither he nor Bashir have anything of value. They are out of luck. The leader again suggests they try another building. One then whispers in the leader's ear as Bashir and Cisco begin to walk off. And the leader hesitantly informs Cisco that they may be able to make a deal after all. The setting is now a dirty, dim-lit corridor where several residents sleep on the floor. A pair of residents emerge from a nearby stairwell, and as they come closer to the camera, it becomes clear they are Bashir and Cisco, dressed in other men's clothes. They try to make the best of a bad situation. Cisco observes that they at least look like they belong in the district. Bashir adds that they smell like it too. They turn a corner to climb the next flight of stairs and find Michael Webb tending to his injured son, Danny. Webb's back is turned to them. They attempt to keep their distance and approach the next stairwell quietly. However, he hears them and turns around, wielding a knife defensively. Cisco puts his hands up and reassuringly asks Webb to put the knife down. When he tells Webb they want to survey the district from the roof, Webb assures him it will not look any better from there. Danny calls for his father in a hoarse voice, obviously in pain. Although Webb keeps the knife pointed at the other men, and as he kneels beside his son, he tells them they mean him no harm. His disposition goes from defensive to nurturing as he puts the knife down and explains that his son was beaten by a group of ghosts near the processing center. Bashir offers to examine Danny's wounds, and while Cisco warns him about interfering, he promises a look will not harm anything. Fortunately, Danny suffered only superficial wounds. At Bashir's request, Webb goes upstairs to retrieve a clean rag and alcohol to nurse Danny's wounds, and Cisco observes that they may have made a new friend. Webb follows Bashir and Cisco out of the building, apparently impressed by Bashir's medical knowledge. He tells Bashir that the district needs another doctor, but Bashir claims not to practice anymore. Insisting that the residents must all pull together, Webb reassures that they will not escape the district anytime. Soon. He believes the district residents need to organize themselves and show the outside world what has happened in the district. As they cannot interfere, Bashir and Cisco respectfully decline and claim they simply want to be left alone. Webb sees their apparent apathy and remarks, "My mistake. I thought you two wanted to get out of here." Bashir and Cisco exchange looks. Meanwhile, Dexter Brenner at a high-class party, complete with the waiter. Sheep Brenner and two of his acquaintances discuss recent events, such as Brenner's recent skiing trip to Christchurch and Mount Cook and how Europe has fallen to political anarchy. When Dax explains that the same political situation might arise in the United States of America, Chris's friends seem indignant. Chris apologizes on her behalf and explains how Jadzia was mugged, claiming such experience will leave anyone with a negative outlook on the future. And said whoever mugged her took everything, even her ID. And Chris's other friend claims Dax is lucky the police did not find her first. She might have ended up in the Sanctuary District. Dax immediately pulls Chris aside and confirms that it's public policy to put those found on streets without ID in sanctuaries. She's sure that must be what happened to Cisco and Bashir. But while Chris observes the sanctuary records aren't posted on the net, he believes he can gain access to them. That night, Bashir and Cisco stand in front of a lighted barrel in an attempt to keep warm while they wait to get their food. Bashir observes that the wait is worse than the line on the Ripple mat, adding that they will probably get their dinner just in time for breakfast. Cisco says to check on the food line. While he is gone, the ghost from before, BC, forces between us to see Bashir's food card. The confrontation is imminent as Cisco returns. He warns BC to leave Bashir alone. BC and the other ghosts gang up on two of them. During the ensuing fight, another man intervenes in an attempt to stop BC. He manages to get the ghost off Cisco. When he leans over Cisco to see if Cisco's okay, BC stabs him. The man loses consciousness and the ghosts take his food card. They run up as alarm sounds and two guards run toward them. Taking the man's ID, Cisco and Bashir do likewise, hiding in a pile of garbage in a nearby alley as the guards run past them. However, once the situation has calmed down, Cisco reveals that the man who just died was Gabriel Bell. Dun dun dun! On the Defiant, the Major enters the bridge and asks O'Brien if he is ready to go. O'Brien replies, saying that Starfleet has denied them permission, but he is unable to raise them. Odo then enters, as he's just been cut off from Starfleet's security. O'Brien confirms that the Defiant's comm system is in perfect working order, but Starfleet has been erased from the timeline. Cisco and Bashir return to Webb and announce they want to join the rebellion. Webb tells Cisco and Bashir about the upcoming rally for public attention and asks them to spread the word. Cisco agrees to pass the news, and he and Bashir begin spreading it around. All of a sudden, a riot breaks out. people living in the district take the processors hostage. Just as Spittle is beginning to about injuring them, Cisco, down with a shotgun, steps up and announces his name. Gabriel Bell. To be continued. Bom, bom, bom. So let's take a look at some continuity and trivia surrounding this episode. Ira Steven Behr said that this episode continues an investigation into G. Roddenberry's universe, which Behr himself had begun in the Maquis Part 2. Behr pointed out that, as well as established in the Star Trek universe originally envisioned by Roddenberry, society had to go through hell before reaching a state of utopia, and that this episode is part of an examination of that hell. Star Trek First Contact, which was released a year and a half after this episode aired, states that World War III took place around the year 2053, roughly 30 years after the Bell riots. This presumably put the social changes mentioned in this episode on hold while the world recovered, as Commander Riker stated in the film that most of the major cities have been destroyed. Starfleet's temporal displacement policy is mentioned for the first time in this episode. The Swells subsequently returned in the 5th season episode Trials and Tribulations, which also introduced a group of officers who enforce it. Two rules of accusation are mentioned. Treat people like in your dead like family. Exploit them. You can't free a fish from water. This is the first episode of the Deep Space Nine TV series to feature Earth. This is also the first of 4 episodes, the other 3 being Past Tense Part 2, Paradise Lost and Children of Time, which did not feature any scenes on Deep Space Nine, or show the station any scenes, save for the opening credits. Although Quark does appear briefly in the bar's back room, displayed on Defiant's view screen. Dr. Bashir's rhetorical question Cisco, if whether mankind were averted if faced with a real crisis, is addressed again in Homefront and Paradise Lost, albeit by different characters. Bashir expresses similar thoughts of learning of Section 31's existence at the end of Inquisition. This is the second Deep Space Nine episode from Season 3 in which a character played by John Lando Bennett is stabbed to death, leading to a main character taking his place. The first one was House of Quark, featuring the death of Bennett's character Kozak. Christopher Brenner's apartment set was later reused as Harry Kim and Libby's apartment in the Voyager episode Non Sequitur. So overall, as the first part of this story, this one really sets up what's going to happen in part 2. But yeah, everything going in Century District, I mean, that's just really, really sad. I hope nothing like that ever happens here in the real world. So there you go. So overall, I give Past Tense Part 1 4 warp cores out of 5. When I tune in bits, we took a look at the final part, Past Tense Part 2. So, until then, live long and prosper, everybody.